Amends at first blush is, please stop being angry at me. But ultimately what an amends truly is me saying to you, I know what I'm capable of. As a matter of fact, I'm probably capable of worse. And I will do whatever it takes to hold back this horse inside of me, to keep this barn door watched and to learn more about what I was really looking for. I'll do the work to never do that to you again.
Welcome to Beyond Theory, a podcast powered by Meadows Behavioral Healthcare that brings you in-depth conversations with firsthand insights from the people on the front lines of mental health and addiction recovery. I'm David Condos, and today's guest is Meadows VP of Addiction Services, Jennifer Angier, who sat down with me to unpack the concepts of grace, mercy, and amends, and explore what they can teach us about recovery and the darkness and light found in all humanity. So let's get out of the abstract and see how this applies in the real world. It's time to go beyond theory.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Angier, and I am the Vice President for Addiction Services at Meadows Behavioral Health.
Awesome. Good to see you again, Jennifer. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I know we've talked before, but for anyone who hasn't heard your story, your background, could you kind of give us an introduction to you, Jennifer Angier, the person? How did you come into this recovery world yourself? And then how did you come to be in a point where you care so much about passing it on to others?
Sure. I'd love to. The story seems like it started yesterday. I can remember exactly where I was standing when I knew that I had to do this work, that these were the people I needed to be with and be around. I was young. I got sober at age 18, not because of any great integrity that I had, simply because for me, the disease of addiction found itself in me very quickly and took me to the end very, very quickly. Soon after that, I fell in love with the process of the courage it takes to show up in treatment. It's where I wanted to be. It's what I wanted to do with my life. So I started as a receptionist and have had just about every job in the industry that I've been allowed to have. At each job has been an important part of who I am today. Yeah. Every job from.
And so you started as the receptionist, just you knew you had to get involved in this some way, somehow. Was that kind of how that played out?
They had a better idea of what I was qualified for. Right. At that time, I didn't know what I was getting into, and I wanted to jump right in. And as a lot of people do when they're touched by how powerful this is. But as the receptionist, I had the opportunity to hear the voices of the people that were calling, the families, the patients. I had the opportunity to greet people when they walked in the door and see the staff come in and just want so much to be able to connect to the purpose that they had when they walked in the door, and the patients, and see them different when they walked out. I fell in love right then and there. And so from that, I've had a lot of opportunities I was sort of raised in this deal as an advocate for patients, through defending their charts, through defending the story as it shows up in their charts, to the insurance companies, to learning how to partner with people that were there to support them, whether that be their family or their loved ones or even the insurance company. And from there, have had many different opportunities, and being at the Meadows feels like home. Like everything that I've done all these years, it's come to this place. I couldn't be more grateful to be with this group.
Yeah. And so, like you said, you've been a part of this world for a long time. You've had a lot of different perspectives on it.
About 30 years now. Yeah. I've been sober 32 years, and I've worked in the field about 30. Yeah.
And what is all that time, all those different jobs you've had along the way, what has that taught you? Like, what do you feel like is one thing that you've learned that stands out from all that?
The most important thing, it's the patience. It's the love. That the courage that they bring to this, and matching it with everything we have in every way, in every role, housekeeping, has an incredibly important role in welcoming that patient into the dark time of their life and to helping them see who they are and what they deserve. They connect with our patients in ways that none of us ever will be able to, supporting them to understand the importance of who they are. Our chefs, our resident counselors, the ones that are with our patients as their heart just sort of breaks when no one else is around, therapists, and the level of intensity that they meet every day with. Every single role is in service of our patient. Every single opportunity that we have is to show them that they deserve the very, very best experience that they can have. So for me, it goes back to where it started. Just being able to be a part of this process is an honor.
Yeah. And so I know you and I have talked about this before, the concept of grace, mercy. Those are words that we're all familiar with. We use them. But could you kind of introduce us to the role that they play in recovery? What part are they in this conversation?
I've had the opportunity to speak on grace in many different forums. It is, and the momentum of it, how it moves through our lives and changes us, and how the deeds of grace in a number of ways, as it changes us and shifts us and allows us a closer relationship with truth. And by grace, I've been often asked to define that word, and I don't have a definition for it, except it's an experience where I have access to the truth. It comes, some people call it a moment of clarity. Some people say it's a spiritual experience. For me, it's the best way I can define it is, in a lot of ways, my sobriety date. I have 32 years. July 6, 1987 is my sobriety date.
And that's your grace.
That day is what I celebrate. So when I celebrate my AA birthday, I don't celebrate the time. I still go back and celebrate July 6, 1987. The fact that day happened in such a dark period of my life, I have no explanation for that. I have no explanation for how I was able to start to see the truth about what was really happening. And so without words to describe that, I try to talk about the experience. And lately, I've just felt drawn to talk about mercy, which lives inside the container that's grace. There's everything is within this experience of grace. Truth lives in there and makes a home for grace. But mercy has been just sort of running around in my mind lately. So why I'm drawn to it, I think that we, as we experience it, it changes us similar to truth and similar to how grace changes us. But the conversation started when I was angry one day about what's happening in our industry. Just angry about people not understanding the level of desperation our patients are experiencing, places that don't support staff in growing their ethics. And I was just so angry. And then the word mercy just came. And I thought about how when a patient is struggling to hear me, when they can't hear me talking about their disease, when they can't hear the truth, I'm actually drawn towards them. I'm not angry at them. I understand they don't have access to it at that moment. And the level of compassion I feel for them, the level of intensity in which I want to help them find a way that they can hear it, not the way that I want to say it. It just intensifies. So why can't I offer that same experience outwardly to people who don't understand this disease as well? Maybe your boss, maybe your mother, your father. Where did this intolerance slip in? So that's where it sort of started. So that day, as I thought some more about it, I remembered a play that I read by Shakespeare, A Merchant of Venice, and in it is this unbelievably beautiful conversation about mercy. Every single line of it starts off by the quality of mercy is not strained. Every line of it just takes my breath away. And so I went back and I started looking at it, and the conversation about what happens, the momentum of mercy, the deeds of mercy, how it impacts us, it almost flows identically to what I've been talking about with grace. And the fact that I even knew that there was something that Shakespeare wrote is a gift of my sobriety.
Yeah.
I got to go to school sober. I've got to experience, I've had the opportunity to experience so many things through the eyes of what sobriety has given me. Now, that doesn't make up for what was lost had it happened in regular time, had it happened the way it happens for other people. But that's okay, right? That's I've been able to really, really find value in the limits of what has happened as a result of my using, and most of that found its way towards my ability to learn.
That's grace that you learned that you had that.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful process, and as the truth comes out about what it means to have stopped learning in 7th grade, and to pick up, at age 28, I am humbled by that. Yeah. And so I love all those quirks about that experience, and I use it. So back to this Shakespeare.
So back
quote.
To the Shakespeare. So that I think that's like we may have read this play, Merchant of Venice, at some point in high school. But this mercy kind of soliloquy, or this piece about mercy. What does that mean? Like, translate that into this conversation.
So every line of it speaks to me in one way or the other. It's a conversation about moving away from justice into the experience of mercy, and where it lives in all of us, and how it ties us to God, but it also connects us back to humanity, and that beautiful conversation between what part of me is God and what part of me is a king, and what part of me is desperately on my knees begging for mercy, and it captures all of it. It's Shakespeare, so obviously I can't just rattle it off because I don't remember it all. But as you look at as you slow it down and look at each line, and just like I think with everything as it comes to us, as we slow it down and look at it and see it today, and then maybe see it 10 years from now, it says something different. So it opens up with the quality of mercy is not strained. It's not pulled in a direction that's not accessible and available. It's available to all of us. He talks about how it droppeth like a gentle rain upon the place beneath. And I have found that to be so true. When I think of people who've experienced the gift of mercy from another, who've been forgiven, who have seen the quality of what it means to be a human being that can forgive, to have another human being forgive you at the level that most of us have been forgiven, to really see that, it's like a gentle rain. And then he says
it is life-giving.
It is. Yeah. I haven't seen. Yeah. That's what I love sharing about it, because you learn something new. And then he says, it is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes, I believe, is how he says it. And so when I remember the day that somebody forgave me, my sister forgave me for the unforgivable act, the one that I would take to my grave. And I remember looking at her and thinking, how did I miss this woman? Like, how did I not know that she was capable of such love? And I still feel that way about her. Like, I still am so blown away by her capacity to love. And it, in some ways, for me, my ability to see it, not her ability to do it, but my ability to see it came in that granting. And then I think about the times where I've begged for it, where I have hurt so badly in my life, because sobriety doesn't make life stop. It actually brings a full, rich experience of love, which all of this comes back to love, So he talks about how the deeds of mercy, he says, mercy, speaking of mercy, he says, 'tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throne monarch better than his crown.
So what does that mean to you? What does that speak to you?
How incredibly powerful this desperation of, I need help. I need somebody, please help me. I have nowhere else to go, whether that's God or this treatment center, or the drugs aren't answering the bell anymore. Nothing is working. There's this silence. It's this desperation for more that's been driving us in the disease. And then all of a sudden there's just absolute silence. And we know that nothing is going to answer that bell anymore. And then steps in mercy, the begging for it. It's not just the getting it, it's the asking for it. That is powerful.
So that's a great place to be.
Right. Yeah. And when he says it becomes the throne monarch better than his crown, right? The ability to give mercy, the ability to know he needs it. Those things are more powerful than power. That even the most powerful thing that we have, money or all the things that I thought would make me feel better when I got sober, that I thought would be the answer to what was happening to me, none of those things had the same economy that the experience of that desperation of begging for help and of receiving it. Nothing had the same power. When I talk about, there's something in the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous that I love. It says, great suffering and great love are AA's disciplinarians. We need no others. So we're disciplined by this suffering, right? We go and say, help me. And we do whatever it takes. We show up at the treatment center that all we saw was it online, we leave our families, we go towards a solution that we don't even know is going to work. All because we're terrified of it continuing, of having to live like this. But then something shifts in us and we don't just stay sober because we're scared. We stay sober because we're loved. And we're loved by people who come to us and reach out. We're loved by what we see in their eyes. We're loved by their actions. We're loved by their stories. And then that disciplines us. We're not disciplined by the king anymore. We're not disciplined by his scepter, right? We're disciplined by love. And when he says that mercy is above this sceptered sway, it is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It's in all of us. It's available, it's accessible, just like the darkness is in all of us. There is this other piece. And so another part of what happens in this is I'm surprised by people's capacity, by nature's capacity, by just in awe of all of it.
Yeah. And I like that. What you were just saying is that a lot of times you would think of addiction as what shows the depths of the darkness of what humanity is capable of, but it also shows the heights of the compassion that humanity is capable of. And
amends is really about that. I mean, amends at first blush is, please stop being angry at me. That's sort of the tension, relieve my tension. But ultimately what an amends truly is me saying to you, I know what I'm capable of. As a matter of fact, I'm probably capable of worse. And I will do whatever it takes to hold back this horse inside of me, to keep this barn door watched and to learn more about what I was really looking for. I'll do the work to never do that to you again. And that's the true exchange of amends. And it isn't until the time of amends gives us the opportunity to know that. So then there's another line that Shakespeare says that is so awesome. He says, again, speaking about mercy, he says, it is an attribute to God himself. And then he says, an earthly power doth then show likest God's when mercy seasons justice. So it is an attribute to God himself. Mercy, to grant mercy, to give mercy, to beg for mercy, to be exposed to mercy, to be healed by mercy. All of it is an attribute to God himself, whatever you believe that God to be. And then he honors what it means to be a human, earthly power. There is a power in being a human being. And he said it is more like God when mercy seasons justice, and just that one mercy seasoning justice, that it adds a different flavor to it. Well, yes, this should be the way it is. I should be dead. I should be in jail. I should never have received the gift of forgiveness from my sister. I shouldn't have a graduate degree. I shouldn't have the keys to the kingdom like I do. I mean, when I mean the kingdom, I mean anything I have. I don't mean like in a heavenly way. I mean like literally on this planet. I have so much that I've been given. People trust me. Somebody's listening to this right now. That's blows me away.
And so if it was strictly justice, none of that would be the case.
Because then what he says...
But mercy steps in. That's what you're saying?
Because then he says something else that's really amazing. He says, consider this, that in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. So in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. And that makes me a little less unique, right? A little less of a horrible human being. Because the reality is, every one of us, if we look at it, in the course of justice, we should never see salvation. But he's not even done there. He says one more thing. So he says, in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. He says, we do pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy.
Yeah. And what is the deeds of mercy mean to you?
That's the action, right? That's the belief in all that it brings. That's going back to the gentle rain, right? And that's what it's growing, and it's caring for everything that's happening around as a result of it. So the deeds of mercy, for me, my responsibility to this work, I can't walk away from it. It owns me. I have to stay here and be present for. I know that sounds dramatic and histrionic, but it's the deeds of mercy for me. We started, and you asked the question about what would I do differently in this industry right now. I hear so many of us, myself included, angry about what's happened with the bad players out there. The people on this podcast have probably gone on 4 or 5 websites that aren't even real. They've called treatment centers and been promised things that are unethical,
a lot
illegal.
of manipulation, and yeah,
it's come into this space, and so we all are angry, and we feel very alone. Or just let's talk about just your family, right? Like your family's still drinking and nobody stopped, and so we're angry about that, or we're angry at our boss or whatever, and it feels alone. We feel alone. But then I think about who really was alone, right? Like Betty Ford. She was all alone.
Yeah. And she was a prominent person really stepping out.
And she stood there and said, you don't need to understand what I'm saying, because it's real, and I'm going to keep walking forward. Bill Wilson, all the people that wrote the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, there was nothing, there weren't 48 other meetings in 2 hours that they could go to. It was just them and total silence behind them. There's a country song, and I can't remember the name of it, but he's talking with his grandfather. But what his grandfather says is, if it looks like we were scared to death, just a couple of kids just trying to save each other, you should have seen it in color. And I think back to all of the people that were before us, the collective unconscious, and I think we're not alone. I don't have it that bad. I have all of these people lean into. I have all these patients that are showing up that are saying, I trust you, I want your help. It's my job to make sure that where they land is safe and deserving of that.
Yeah. So what would be one thing that you'd change about this field, about behavioral healthcare?
That we would come together in a way that that we would stop being afraid of the consequences of being honest. That we would, if we've made mistakes, we would own them. If we would do what we ask the patients to do,
Right.
We would we would walk away from an income sometimes that we didn't know how it was going to come. We would take time away from what our routine is. We would honestly look at, do we have the right and best place for them, not for us? That's what I would change. We would remember who we serve.
Yeah. Yeah, and then looking even wider at the general public, what's one thing you would change about what people understand about this?
I'm grateful. I'm so grateful for the focus on what opiates have done in this country. This disease is outpacing us. It's really, really hard to admit that we're not making a dent. I don't believe it's over. I believe we still have a lot of work that we can do. and I'm going to probably give wrong numbers, but the last I looked last year, roughly 72,000 people died from opiate overdoses. 72,000. 88,000 died from alcoholism. The problem's not opiates. The problem's the disease of addiction.
It's not a brand new problem. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
More people died from alcoholism. Combine them together, that number is, it does. I've checked and rechecked, and while maybe don't have the exact numbers right, it's too many. It doesn't seem right. It seems like false information, and it's not. You know, a lot of us are, when we talk about where are the patients now, you know, the different treatment centers have less patients than they've had before. It's not because they're all going to different treatment centers. It's because they're dying. So I would say our problem is a disease of addiction. It's much, much more broad, much more pervasive, much more devastating than the drug that is going into us. The opioid use, however, it's killing them so quickly. Yeah. Usually what happens when a patient relapses, they come back and they're surprised by the disease, right? They say, okay, what you said was, whoa, like I didn't even want to use and I used. Didn't expect that. Now tell me what to do again, because now I'm hearing it differently. I thought all I had to do was want to quit using, but now I hear you. It's bigger than, because my problem, if my problem was drinking or using drugs, why do I pick up a drug or drink every time I'm sober? My problem is being sober. So
kind of sitting with yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what happens in my brain and what we know today about the disease of addiction and how it impacts our logic and our reason and where it lives in the brain, all those things are available and accessible for people to understand today. It's just the facts today. But still our patients show up. And I totally expect this with, okay, the problem is solved. I want to quit using because I didn't want to before, but now I do. So problem is solved. But if you think about that with any other disease like cancer, if I came into my doctor's office and was like, I just want the cancer to stop. Like, I don't want to have cancer. I would like for this to end.
I've definitely made up my mind that I'm done with cancer.
Cancer. The doctor would be like, well, that's not how this plays out. That's really good because it'll get you to chemo, but that's where the treatment is. Right. So for most of our patients, they have to go through a time, I did, where I thought that not wanting to use was going to be enough. Until that day when I walked up to the nurse's station and I knew it wasn't going to be enough. I knew because when I looked back on my experience with drugs and alcohol, I saw where I should have wanted to stop. I saw where I wasn't able to see the truth. And I saw and sort of felt that storm coming. I knew it would come again. And that's why I said I'm going to use again. So what typically happens when a patient relapses is they come back surprised by their disease. They're surprised. They're like, okay, I didn't think it was true. I thought it would be different, but you were right. Now help me. The problem with the opioid crisis that we're in is they don't get to come back and say their surprise is death. It's happening so quickly. We don't get another chance.
So how does the industry get ahead of that?
We get ahead of that by being willing to have more conversations about medications that will provide that moment of that breath between the thought to use and using. There are ways that I have seen work with our patients that provide that space where they can find their way to the solution and they're not overrun by the desire to use. We can provide environments where patients won't want to stay for long enough, where there can be shifts in their behaviors and their attitudes. But as it is now, where they go, if we're cruel to them or we don't offer them real life stuff, or I got sober at 18 and I was told I couldn't go to school. I was told that right was not mine anymore. I was told that I just had to live with that. And today that's not how it is. Young adults are embraced in the experience of college and in their education. So rather than take from our patients, we provide a space that they want to stay in so time happens for them and their brain starts to heal. So there's a number of different things that we can do. Another thing that I see that we do is if a family member is sick, deathly ill, and they're in the hospital, what happens? The family comes, right? They rush to the side of their loved one. There's always a mom that won't leave. She won't even go take a shower. There's a mom, there's a dad, there's an aunt, there's somebody. Yeah. until that right person shows up and gives them the privilege to go take a shower, but then they're right back. And what we say to our family members, not at the Meadows, but what is said in this industry is drop them off at the gate and leave.
We'll take it from here.
We'll take it from, by the way, it's a disease. And by the way, it's a fatal disease. Now go. And if you call, there's something wrong with you. We have to let them sit bedside. That's what that is. And I don't mean literally, that's not the right thing for this, for anyone. But how do we let the people that love be a part of the healing? That's another way that we do it. So we create a space in which they can do their work. And then time has its way with them.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll wrap up with 2 quick kind of tips or nuggets that we can leave listeners with. First, what would be a recovery book, a recovery resource out there that has meant a lot to you, something that you find yourself recommending?
I always recommend The Spirituality of Imperfection. Ernest Kurtz and Ketchum, I think is her last name. And that book provides storytelling. I love storytelling. And it tells the story of what it means to be imperfect and the beauty in that. And it tells the story through all religions, Buddhist, every religion. It's Dr. Seuss. I mean, it's all these beautiful stories. And you find yourself in it. And you find that there's a crack in everything that God has made, I believe is what Emerson said.
Yeah.
It's in there.
Yeah. And that connects back with what we were saying about knowing what we're all capable of. Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, what would be one piece of advice, something that was given to you in the right moment, something that's meant a lot to you, something that you find yourself wanting to pass on?
I think right now, what I would say is, just based on the title of this talk, based on who might find their way to this podcast, what I would say again is we're not built to do this alone. You don't have to do it alone. Now's the time. Like right now is the time. Don't wait. Get help. That is one of our greatest strengths. And I think I still don't know how that came to me. I don't know how, I can't describe how that person found her way to the doors. I'm grateful to her.
Jennifer Angier is the Vice President of Addiction Services for Meadows Behavioral Healthcare. You can find out more about how the Meadows programs approach treating addiction at meadowsbh.com. To check out more episodes of this podcast and find all kinds of other resources and tools from Meadows Behavioral Healthcare, visit beyondtheorypodcast.com. Finally, thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of Beyond Theory.